I'm Johan Rashivega with Holyoke Media here in our studios in One Court Plaza, Holyoke, Massachusetts, and I want to welcome Eric Lemmon, part of the new cycle of Victory Players, Puerto Abierto, Open Port, and you are here in this residency having the first steps of the process, creating what is going to be one of the pieces for this new series. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do, particularly having this interesting mixture of electronic and acoustic sounds combined into your compositions.
Yeah. So technology is really interesting because it allows you, theoretically, to do lots of things that maybe you couldn't do before. And people, when they think about like technology and music, they think of like algorithms and computers and stuff like that. But at one point, something like the piano was a new technology. So this is a really interesting thing to me because our perception of technology now has obviously changed over time. But that doesn't mean that the technologies that have existed for a long time, that we can't do something new with them. And so kind of the organology of these instruments as they've developed and the techniques that people use to play them is something that is profoundly interesting. So what I'm doing and what I'm thinking about with the piece that I'm writing now is how can I use the piano, for example, in a new and interesting way. I'm taking an EBow, it's an electric bow, it's neologism for that, and it's basically a little device that has electromagnetic inside, and you turn it on, and it causes the strings of the piano to vibrate back and forth. And instead of sounding like the hammer of the piano hitting the string, you get it blooming up like it was just like that, like it was arising out of nothing. It's a really interesting sound. And usually people use these for playing guitar. Yeah. And then another thing that I'm thinking about is drawing fishing lines that have been rosined with rosin that you usually use on violin bows. And you can use that and you get this really thick, resonant sound, complicated sound out of the lower strings of the piano when you do that. So it's a really exciting, interesting way to experiment with the piano. And people have been doing this for quite some time using these techniques on the instrument, but I get to put my little twist on it. Yeah.
Having the opportunity of talk and exchange ideas and having conversations with the Victory Players, how has been the feedback, the reception, the excitement about being able to utilize these different approaches to making and playing music with your ideas of going a little bit beyond the structured or the traditional way of making art music?
Yeah. So they are incredibly excited about this. All the response I get has been really positive because we're making music out of a tradition, but we're making new music. So what can we do that's creative and new? And that could be the materials, like the harmonic materials, or just creating something that's aesthetically new, but playing with traditional techniques. That is also very new. But they are trying to do new music. And so what's a new way that we can play this instrument? What new way can we approach it? They've been very receptive to this. And what we've been talking about is, okay, what's the best way to approach this technique? So going back to using this fishing string on the piano, right, and scrubbing back and forth, well, when you change direction, you can stop the piano string and then you stop the vibration. But what if I wanted it to keep going? So there's actually a technique to doing this. And so, we engage with the players, Nathan, the pianist, for example, and we talk about, okay, what's the best way to approach this? Is it just keep the string, the fishing line moving? Or if we leave some of the string bare of rosin, it actually kind of glides off and it stops making the sound in much a way as if a violinist stopped their bow very slowly and smoothly. And so there's lots of things that we consider, and they've been really excited about it and interested in how we can approach this. Yeah.
Talking about the elements of identity that come with this creation being the topic of Open Port, and at the same time, integrating technology, and as you very well described, not necessarily talking about the modern technology that it is utilized for art music, but also being innovative, being open to experiment and utilize even with the most rustic and elementary ways to generate sound, create something that sounds different and new.
Yeah, so I think that one thing that I think about with technology a lot is that it's inscribed with the values of the people that created the technology. So when we think about the piano is used with equal tempered keys, so each pitch is the same distance apart. And it also comes out of European classical music. So it's very specifically focused towards music that was traditionally created by Europeans. And so kind of the projection of that across the entire world in a way is a certain kind of colonization. Right? And so if we think about identity, how can we break this down? Well, if we're using these instruments that come out of that tradition, if we make it new, if we use it in a different way, maybe we're seizing this, we're taking this away from the Europeans, so to speak, or,
Which is fascinating because that reminds me a theory by a Mexican composer, Julián Carrillo, who was theorizing about the 13th sound in the diatonic scale by taking those small commas that are not included in the regular keyboard, and now you have another sound, putting them all together in order to have the full spectrum in a diatonic scale. So it immediately makes total sense that experimenting with that, you are opening the eyes and the ears of perception of the public about things that are part of the nature of sound, but that we are not used to listen to.
Right. I think that something that's really important about this is that when we think about sound, right, or music, right, this is culturally constructed. And it comes out of these deep traditions, whether it's music from Puerto Rico or, klezmer music or music out of Africa or gamelan music. All these things come out of particular traditions, and they don't necessarily always use the 12 tones of the Western musical scale. And so if we try and think about this, I know that Colby, who you've already spoken with, he's focusing on microtonal music, and he's trying to explore this as an interesting space for play. But there's other spaces of play beyond just the equal tempered pitches of the piano, right? There's different ways of considering timbre, of rhythm. All these things are important and play into this. And I think that it's really important that we don't limit it to like something that, it's given that this is what music should be, but that we, as listeners and as creators, we're opening our ears always to what's possible.
So how do you feel after being here in Holyoke, getting the opportunity to talk with Victory players, also to get along with the other composers of Puerto Abierto? What comes with you now in order to start working or continuing working on your piece?
Yeah, so I think that working with the players has been absolutely stellar. I just have such a positive response. They're great people. It's so lovely working with them. And then with the other composers, the composers that were here last year, hearing what they've done has been really ear-opening and really, and also eye-opening, I guess, at that point. And I'm learning new things always from my peers, especially my cohort that has come here this year. They have told me really interesting things. They have different ideas. I hear them in like their rooms composing, and like I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. That's really cool. So I think that these kinds of settings where there's lots of interlocution and people like are able to talk about music in depth, really a wonderful place to learn and grow and create. Yeah.
Well, we are looking forward to listen the final result of your piece for this new cycle, Puerto Abierto. And thank you so much for being here and for sharing these details about your process and how much now the exploration and discovering the sounds that you're going to create will be an experience that will be eye and ear opening for the public.
Thanks so much.
This is our conversation with Eric Lemmon, composer of the cycle of Victory Players, Open Port, El Puerto Abierto.